Kigali, Rwanda, to do a study on inclusive plastic waste management, including looking at the gender dimensions. And I'm here, Sasha Gabizon of Women Engaged for a Common Future. I'm here with colleagues from Nexus Foundation Indonesia, as well as from CJAT Kenya. And we're the team looking around Rwanda this week, visiting different actors engaged in plastic waste recycling, having discussions, roundtable discussions with different stakeholders, understanding the legislation and what makes Rwanda special. I have now been visiting many actors in the plastic waste sector here in Rwanda to try and find good practices and to understand the role of women and men, how women and men workers are protected, etc. So it was really interesting. First of all, we had a roundtable discussion. There were many actors. We had, for example, a woman entrepreneur who uses recovered plastic from plastic bottles, for example, to then shred it and then make it into plastic bags, which are recycled plastic bags, which are then used for things like carrying produce like potatoes or yams, etc. So really interesting to see how this is already happening here in Rwanda. We also spoke to Envirosurf, for example, which is a very interesting company, one of the few in Africa doing recycling of electronic waste, including the plastic of electronic waste.
The most important thing to know about electronic waste is the chemicals that used in many electronic waste products. One of it is bromoflame retardants that made the electronics not easily burn. But these chemicals is very dangerous and carcinogen, and then already agreed to be eliminated under the Stockholm Convention. In the future, we recommended that electronic waste should not be allowed to be remade or used to make toys, especially for children under 5, and also for kitchen utensils, like for cooking materials and so on. We would like to have that kind of prohibitions and strongly recommend the government of Rwanda to set the standard and also regulations.
We also discussed with other women entrepreneurs who are more involved in the collection of plastic waste. Here in Kigali, for example, you need to have like a license, and they try to get licensed plastic collectors. Sometimes, however, we also understand there's still informal workers. So we try to understand, how can you support also the informal workers to be more formalized, to be better organized? Should they maybe organize as a cooperative? So we had these discussions, very interesting. We also went to visit, for example, a company which collects plastic from agriculture. And agriculture often uses plastic to cover areas, so they protect the seedlings, for example. And then what do you do with this plastic waste? So they, for example, take back that plastic waste and then they melt it again, and then they make bags for seedlings from it.
When recycled plastics used for agriculture, some of these low-grade plastics products might be or potentially will be degraded as microplastics into the soil. So this kind of purpose and repurposing and then recycling under the principle of circular economy has to be carefully regulated and advised. So the toxic chemicals in the flexible plastics or containing UV328, that's another chemicals that prohibited already under the Stockholm Convention. We have to make sure that that kind of new products will not be easily degraded and also contaminating the soil.
And the most interesting visit was to the landfill. I've never been to such a clean landfill in my life. They are making sure that when the waste comes in, it's immediately separated when it comes into green waste, into plastic waste, into textile waste. And there also are a lot of women working there, so 60% of the workers are women. They are wearing, personal protection equipment, and they work in different shifts. They have health insurance, so very interesting, the protection and that these are formal, waste workers. They are paid salaries. It's a very secure environment, very different from some of the landfills we have seen in other countries. But of course, there is also still scope for improvement.
I was surprised to see a landfill on top of the hill because technically it was not supposed to be on top of the hill. But we've seen it on the ground how the operator tried to operate the landfill activities in a sanitary landfill process, which is very good because they covered the landfill every day with topsoil, to prevent fire and then also to prevent the smell. However, the leachate coming out from the landfill goes to the leaching pond, but it's still in open space, and it would be better to be captured because they produce methane gas, which can be used for lighting or for cooking.
Rwanda has a very good policy which stems from the establishment of an institution that undertakes gender monitoring across all government policies, implementations, and even programs. Secondly, the other I would take as good example or good practice from policy perspective is what I learned about what we call gender seal. So gender seal is gender aspect of encouraging industries. Agenda is a certification program that try to encourage the private sector to particularly implement issues of gender in their operations.
So gender equality policies in Rwanda are very strong. Everybody does gender budgeting. All ministries need to understand the gender dimensions. And all positions and all companies, also private companies working on waste, need to have at least 30% women in their boards, and then at all managerial and workers levels. And this shows in this country that women are really a very strong part of the decision making, of the work forces, of the managerial forces. I think there's a lot we can learn from this visit in Rwanda.
After we see the situation, we decided to take the samples of soil from the riverbank as well as from the agriculture land, just to find out what chemicals we can find inside the soil. And in addition to soil samples, we also collected several samples and products from Kigali during our visit. We will see later, after we analyze it in the laboratory, what kind of plastic chemicals that we can find in those products. Once we know how much or how high certain type of plastic chemicals, it will be important to provide recommendations and advice, especially when a plastic waste converted into another product.